Hi everyone, it's Ileana and I have a quick card to share with you today. Believe it or not, this card was rather quick to make. I am starting off with the Altenew Watercolor Bouquet stencil, and I'm just adhering it down with some post-it tape, and I am placing it on some of the exposed corners that are on my card front. I am doing a card front just because I am doing some embossing, and then it kind of helps with the warping later on. I am using a finger dauber because I did find that it was easier to do than with one of the larger ink blending tools. There are lots of little sharp corners in this stencil, and the finger dauber does really help with easier application. The first time I played around with the stencil, I was very careful, and I masked all different kinds of parts with post-it tape so that I wouldn't have colors in the wrong area. But then I just decided to not worry about it, and with the finger dauber you have a little more control. Now I've switched over from the flowers and I'm doing the green stems. Now close to the flower there's a little bitty stem that goes right under the flower, and then the one up above. What I did was I pulled out a Fantastics. This is a bullet nib, and I'm just pouncing the color in between the stem and the flower buds. If you don't have any of the Fantastics, you can probably try maybe something like a Q-tip to apply the smaller details of those tiny little stems. So now I'm pretty much satisfied with this, and I'm going to pull this off, and now I'm going to rotate my stencil and I'm going to line it up. It is really easy to line it up. You just have to keep the bottom leaves in mind. Once those are lined up, you're all set. Now I'm switching over to a darker color. I did put all of the colors of the ink in the upper left-hand corner just so that it's easier for you to see. Lately I've been making these videos ahead of time, and sometimes it takes me a while to do the voiceovers, and so by having those colors in the upper left hand corner, it kind of reminds me of the process that I did when I was making a card. So for this bottom leaf that I'm working on right now, you do need to be super careful because there is a little vein that you could easily ruin if you're not careful. I did use the same Fantastics to add the darker color detail to the smaller stems. And now I'm going to remove the stencil, and this is the magic. This is beautiful just the way it is, but I wanted to take it another step further. So I've wiped off my stencil, completely removed all the ink from it, and now I'm putting it back onto my panel. I've used the first part and of the stencil, and now I see that I've missed a spot, so I'm going back to add color. I'm just going to use a microfiber towel to remove the color. You want to make sure that it's completely lined up perfect, or else you're not going to get the outcome that you desire. So now I'm adding some VersaMark. I did try all kinds of different things to see which one would work best, and I'll show you that at the end. But for now, I just wanted you to see that I used VersaMark, and I'm pulling out my very neglected sparkle embossing powder. I'm not sure what brand this is. This is a very old brand. I believe you could probably get some Judikins. They have a sparkle one, but this is just what I had available, and so I just pulled it out. I am taking the time to remove any stray embossing powder, and now I'm heat setting it. I did notice that I missed a small section of the largest leaf, and so now I'm taking my VersaMark marker and I'm just coloring in the very tip and adding a little bit more embossing powder to it. Now that it's all done, I'm going to add some color, and I'm noticing that I missed a spot of where the embossing powder did not fully melt, and so I went back and I melted it to make sure. You want to make sure that it's completely dry before you start ink blending. So I'm taking some Lagoon ink and a Dauber, and I'm just adding some color behind the flower. And because we put some embossing powder and heat set that, the flower is protected underneath that layer. And so I'm adding some color. I kind of really like using regular ink pads. It just seems like you don't get the sponge marks as bad. And so I think I'm going to try to use these colors a little bit more. So I'm just adding some color just to create an ethereal look. And so once I'm happy with the amount of color I have added, then I'm just going to add my sentiment, and I'm using one from Bamboo Rose. The reason why I'm making this card is because my mom is going to have knee surgery, and so I plan to fly down to Houston so that I could be with her during that process. And so this is the card that I want to give her after her surgery. This seems like the perfect spot because it's just hugging that rose. I am using the transparency to line up my sentiment because I want to make sure that it's perfect after all of that work. And I'm going to stamp it onto my transparency. So this will allow me to see if it's straight and also if I like the placement of that sentiment right there. It's just a little bit crooked, so I'm going to adjust it. I'm going to wipe it off with my tidy towel and just straighten it out just a tiny bit. So I'm using the grid lines on the lid. And I'm going to give it another try. And that seems perfect to me. So I'm going to go ahead and add my sentiment. I am using the Nocturne ink from VersaFine Clair. And I'm going to stamp it a couple of times. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to add some clear embossing powder. I didn't use the sparkle one. I didn't want to take away any of the shine and sparkle from the rose. And so I'm just using regular clear embossing powder. I am removing any strays because the embossing powder will leave a mark on the ink blending. And I'm going to add this onto a card base. Because of all of the embossing, it did warp my card panel a little bit, and so I like to add the panels to a card base. That way it kind of straightens it out. Otherwise the card is kind of a little warped. So I'm taking my mini MISTI and I'm taking the insert out, and I'm just using the corner to line everything up and set it in place. My card base must not have been cut even on the bottom because there's a little bit of an overlap on the bottom. So I'm just going to take my scissors and just trim off that tiny little bit that's exposed underneath. I decided not to add any kind of an embellishment onto it. I thought it just distracted, and so I just left it that way. So here are my experiments. So this one I added some embossing paste like I did on one of my previous videos. I colored the embossing paste, and this other one I used translucent embossing paste. This one is just a failed attempt with goosebumps. So I added too much goosebumps to that, and it kind of bled underneath the stencil. So that's why I decided to use VersaMark. That's my card for today. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the like, and be sure to leave a comment down below. Have a great day.